Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film. And we're getting to the very end of my Wes Anderson series, as I only have a couple episodes left. This one has gone much quicker than my 80 weeks of John Ford that I did, and soon to be 60 weeks of Alfred Hitchcock that I'm starting in August. But joining me with someone who will be making some appearances on that Hitchcock series is my friend Emily. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And we're going to be talking about one of Wes Anderson's four Roald Dahl short films that all came out in 2023 on Netflix, The Swan. And for those who haven't tuned into the show before, we do have three segments. So we will talk about coming attractions for May 2nd. It's May already. I don't love that. Um, and then we will talk about our feature film, The Swan, which is actually a 17-minute short film, and then have some recommendations for you. But getting into coming attractions, the by far the biggest release this weekend, and honestly the only wide release, is Thunderbolts, which is the new Marvel movie that's coming out this weekend. And generally, most studios don't release a whole lot of other movies that are very big when you have a Marvel movie coming out, but there are a lot of limited releases and VOD releases. And Emily has one that she is morbidly curious about. And Emily, why are you morbidly curious about Rust?
So, following the incident with Alec Baldwin, I know that filming wasn't yet complete when that incident happened, and I know it must have been a very traumatic event for everyone on set who was there, witnessed it, whether it was firsthand, secondhand trauma. And I'm very curious as to whether or not the incident affected the portrayal of characters in the film, if there's going to be any tangible differences in the acting styles and in the personas of people in the film pre and post tragedy. So I'm just morbidly curious for that reason. I think it's something that we haven't really seen a lot in a lot of recent films as far as tragedies happening on set. So out of morbid curiosity, I am curious if that affected the filming.
Well, and like, unfortunately, it was the cinematographer who got shot and killed during this incident. And I guess it would be interesting to see if there's any kind of visual differences between the film before or after. Obviously, most films aren't shot in chronological order. So, but I'm more morbidly curious about who thought this was a good idea to finish this movie than release it.
Yes. I
But
think this one might have been better off left unfinished.
and not seen the light of day. But you know what? Some they did finish it, and somebody decided to distribute this. And because I watch everything, I will be watching Rust, and it'll be interesting to see um how that plays out, because this year's been weird in terms of like these movies that we didn't think would see the light of day because of magazine dreams that came out earlier this year with Jonathan Majors, which was supposed to come out 2 years ago, and then all those allegations came out against him for beating his girlfriend. And it's just like, well, they decided to release it, and it came out, and so is Rust. So 2025, the year movies that we never thought would come, actually did. And maybe this one in particular probably shouldn't have, but we'll have to see. Um, I will have to say the one I'm most excited about. I came very close to picking The Surfer with Nicolas Cage in it because I do love some unhinged Nick Cage thrillers, but I'd be lying if I said it wasn't the Thunderbolts movie, because I do love my Marvel movies. And this one, as of us recording this episode, they had their world premiere last night. And a lot of social media reactions are saying that this is one of Marvel's best movies. And I'm like, you got my curiosity, because like also I'm excited about like the characters and the cast, because Florence Pugh's amazing and I love her. David Harbour's so much fun, and this seems like it's a kind of movie where it's like they could just do their own little story over here and have fun with it, and that's refreshing at this point, and I'll take it. But it'll be an interesting weekend because obviously Thunderbolts is going to be eating up most of the box office. But the question is, how much money will Minecraft still make? It's going, because It is. It is making a ridiculous amount of money. Uh, I think we're about a generation older than where Minecraft like really hit that stride with those Zoomers. But they're going and bringing
Oh,
chickens with them.
there's not a kid that I know that isn't absolutely obsessed with Minecraft. So, I've never played myself, so maybe one day I will, and then I'll get into it too, and I'll get the hype. But until then, I'm just vicariously living through
Yes.
through the child
I can
development.
I can then scream and cheer when they say chicken jockey. Um I was there for the Jack Black. They knew that they would get chained to the theater when they cast Jack Black in the movie. So, but it'll be interesting. Obviously, the Thunderbolts will make a decent amount of money. It's not the biggest property that Marvel has going for them, but and the box office can use the money because the first couple of months of this year, up until Minecraft, were terrible. So, we need to keep these movies alive. I do my best. But let's get into our feature film, which is The Swan. Now, I only have very minimal backstory for this because, like, this was part of a collection and there's not specific backstory for this, but this is directed by Wes Anderson, obviously, but only written by Wes Anderson and no story credit for anybody else, which for most of his films, he usually has others that he collaborates with, but these seem like these are very much like Wes Anderson was doing this on his own. Um, this was, if I'm not mistaken, the second movie that came out in 4 straight days, where they released each day one of these short films, and this is adapted from a Roald Dahl story, and was originally supposed to be an anthology film. That's how Wes Anderson wanted it. It was supposed to be the four of them collected into one movie, which a year later Netflix did release it in that format, so you could watch it that way. But Netflix apparently wanted to win an Oscar for best live action short film. So they cut it up, and Wes Anderson was so mad, supposedly, allegedly, that he didn't even show up to get his Oscar when it did indeed win. When Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar did win best live action short film. But all four of these premiered at the 80th Venice International Film Festival, and that's about all the background I have. But, and our synopsis is pretty lean. A small, brilliant boy is tormented by two large, idiotic bullies. So, keep it a
Oh,
nice, sweet.
that's it for the synopsis. Wow.
That is it for the synopsis. And then over the course of 17 minutes, it gets weird. But Emily, what are your general thoughts on the Swan?
I'm surprised that this didn't win the Oscar. I thought it was fascinating. I thought
Mhm.
it was so interesting to see, the grown character recounting a story from his youth. And I think what's so interesting about that too is he got to put his own spin on it as far as his own recollection. So whether that's like talking about like how what the boys were saying in like a mocking way, I thought it was so interesting. It's like when you have something that happens to you when you're a kid and you talk about it and it's like something you're still bitter about. Like you can just like feel it in the character's tone.
Yeah,
I thought it was so interesting.
the voices he put on some of these characters are hilarious. Which I think a big shout out needs to go to Rupert Friend, who is indeed our narrator, which he's been acting since like 2004. He was in a small role in the 2005 Pride and Prejudice, which just actually got re-released for its 20th anniversary. Don't love that realization. But he's been in a lot of things, and I've seen him pop up in small stuff, and he's been in a few Wes Anderson films lately. I think the first role that I really recognized him from was Death of Stalin, where he plays one of Stalin's children. And he's kind of an idiot. But he brings so much personality to this. Like, yeah. And like him doing like the little voices on of the bullies and everything. And all four of these short films are structured in a way that you have a narrator, and the narrator or the characters in the film are read it basically, reading the script to us. and putting their own little spin on it, acting things out along the way. But if you didn't have the right person to like narrate this film, I don't think this would work in the slightest. But he does a really great job bringing that energy to it.
Yeah, and something I thought was interesting was that it's a recounting a very traumatic event. And what I
Mm,
thought was interesting is that the most traumatic parts seem to have the adults step in.
mm,
Like laying like on the train tracks
correct.
and
Yep.
recounting that part. You see him as an adult. You don't see the child step into this role. You see the adult like as if they're still like
Mm.
reliving that event that happened.
Well, and I think what you're getting at too, in terms of the way that this is structured in its storytelling, really shows the mental space in terms of where this person is going back into these memories and really reliving them and
Yes.
being stuck in it. And that train sequence where like they force him onto the tracks and just the description of like how he flattens himself as much as possible to avoid the train hitting him. And so much of this dialogue is very, very expressive and so detailed. And that sequence, this film's brutal. Like there's
Yes. Oh,
some dark stuff that happens in
it
this
was
journey that this young boy has to go through.
it was upsetting. Like the ending is honestly very it's like traumatic for the viewer in a sense.
Mhm.
It's a very upsetting ending. Like you're expecting I think a lot of times like viewers are expecting some type of happy ending or some type of like successful resolution. But in this one, aside from knowing that, it's the adult version of the character telling you the story, there's not a happy ending.
No, and especially how the swan actually gets incorporated into the story. And it's brutal. It's like a wasteful act in terms of what these kids are doing for like this poor swan that's just like living his life. And then what they wind up making this young boy do.
Yeah.
And which is interesting from a creative standpoint because like Emily, you mentioned where it really gets intense, you see the adults coming in here in this situation. I think the visual of putting like bloodied wings and everything on would have been a bit much. So then they use stop motion animation to bring that moment to life. And that's one of the things that Wes Anderson has been doing in each of these short films is like slowly dropping in a little bit of stop motion for added storytelling. And it's so creative. And like this is one of the most like it feels like a play in some way, but it's such an elaborate setup to everything. And it's a it's a powerful message about perseverance and because like I know I like speak for myself. I've been through a lot of bullying in my life
Yeah.
growing up. Um, dealt with it almost every single day. And a story like this, it's like it's hard to like keep going through that. And I did not experience anything close to what this poor kid had to go through. Getting tied down on a railroad track and then being strapped with like bloody swan wings and stuff like that. It's just like this demented. Like these
Yeah.
bullies might be idiotic, but they're demented and really
Oh,
messed
because
up kids.
it was past bullying. It became
Mhm.
torture. It
Yeah,
became psychological torture and cruel in so many senses that it's like unfathomable to think that people could even do that to another human. But at the end, there's like that cutscene that says this came from an event from a news article. So it was like something not necessarily exactly the same, but something similar had happened to someone in the past, and that's horrifying to think about.
something inspired Roald Dahl to tell this story, and that's one thing that because like Emily, are you very versed on like Roald Dahl books and stuff like that?
I read them when I was younger.
Mhm.
I can't necessarily tell you too much about them off the top of my head, but I do know that I did delve into it in my youth.
I I luckily held on to a bunch of mine because I would love for my children at some point to read them when they're kids and stuff like that. But like one of the hallmarks is like Roald Dahl made some dark children's stories. Like
Yeah.
some dark stuff happens to these kids. And this really falls in line with that because like this is like like Stephen King level of like I'm telling a coming of age story. There's gonna be dead and stuff like that. It's just like it's
Animal
pretty dark.
mutilation.
Yeah, it's animal mutilation, attempted murder.
Yeah.
Like these kids literally Dick Dastardly this. Like we're gonna tie you to a railroad track. Like
Yeah.
like we're watching a Dudley Do Right cartoon or something like that. But one of the things that I love most about this is just the production design and how it's so fluid and how they incorporate the space. It feels like a toy, but it also feels so tactile and real that we get lost in this story because all of these things are literally around us. Like this it feels so it's so creative. And I love all the little bookends with Ray Fiennes as Roald Dahl. He just has that presence that like perfectly captures him. And like how he comes in at the very end and kind of like lays out the morality of this and the themes of it for us to chew on as we, process this little 17-minute film. But it's such an interesting presentation. And I don't know, like, have you seen any of these short films up to this point?
I hadn't. This is the first one I had seen, and I was just so fascinated by it. Especially like you said, like the set, like you go in and it's
Mhm.
like this hedge maze
Yes.
that walking into, and it's like, oh, it lives like four doors down, and you see him walking and taking a couple steps backwards, and like a door opens from the side of the
Mhm.
maze, and and I just thought it was such a like you said, like an incredible use of space for just the fluidity of just continuing the story. It really added to the flow.
How how Wes Anderson approached each of these films is very much this. And the most elaborate one is the Henry Sugar one, which is also 40 minutes. So it's like twice as long as any of these other short films. And that's the one that wound up winning the Oscar because like that was like the crown jewel. Like I remember reading Henry Sugar in middle school. And I didn't recall any of these other stories, but like this one sticks with you, and it sits in thinking about it long after you're done watching. And like I rewatched this last night, and just sitting there thinking like brings back some unfortunate memories with the bullying and stuff like that, but just from a creative storytelling perspective, there's so many interesting things that Wes Anderson does to bring this story to life.
Yeah, it was surprising. Like I feel
Mm.
like nothing that happened next was something that you could have anticipated happening
No.
even up till the end. Like the whole thing was just full of like twists and turns, the whole story. But and I think that's part of why it's so impressive that the flow was created even with all of like these unexpected things happening. It never like it never broke. There was never like a moment of like disconnect in the story. Everything, one thing moved to another, and it was done in a way that made sense.
There's a fluidity in terms of how this all comes together, and there is a this is a fully realized vision. And that's one thing that you can say about Wes Anderson, any of his films. They're fully realized what he has envisioned for this film. And nobody else could really make it that way. There's like something very idiosyncratic about it. And rewatching these short films just reinforces to me that nobody should adapt any Roald Dahl that isn't Wes Anderson. Because he just really understands it, whether it's Fantastic Mr. Fox or any of these four short films. I guess, Emily, do you have anything else that you wanted to add that stood out to you about the film?
I think, I liked the end with the resolution as far as getting the narration
Mm.
meant to be like Roald Dahl. And I like the idea, that there's people that, no matter what they go through in life, no matter what horrors that they've seen, that they're able to persevere, that they're able to keep going and not break. And like w when the boy in the film says like he knew he was going to win.
Yeah.
Like he just knew in that second he was going to win no matter what happened. It's like a just like this moment of strength. And I think that that's such an important message that, you can go through miserable things, but if you can pull from your core just a moment of strength, you can really get through some horrifying things even when you think you might not be able to.
And I think a great way to end this discussion about this is to read this quote from Roald Dahl that he has at the end, where he says, "Some people, when they have taken too much and have driven beyond the point of endurance, simply crumble and collapse and give up. Others, however, though they are not many, who will, for some reason, always be unconquerable. You meet them in the time of war and also in time of peace. They have an indomitable spirit, and nothing, neither pain nor torture, nor threat of death, will cause them to give up. Little Peter Watson was one of these." And just think that's in Ray Fiennes' voice. And it just, there's like this aged warmth to just every word that he says. And peak casting. That was an incredible choice to get Ray Fiennes to come in as Roald Dahl for this. And I don't know personality wise what Roald Dahl was like necessarily. I've never watched an interview with him or anything, if there are any accessible, but I 100% automatically believe that Ray Fiennes is exactly what Roald Dahl was actually like, because it just feels so committed to this feeling and what he does. He gets a lot more screen time in Henry Sugar than these other ones, because like these other ones, he's kind of just there at the end to kind of like add that little like punctuation at the end of the story, and that one was so well put and really effective for sure. But would certainly recommend these. And Emily, I would definitely recommend, if you want to check out the other three, the two of them, Poison and Ratcatcher. Ratcatcher is like kind basically like a little horror film, to be honest. And Poison's definitely like a thriller. Henry Sugar is very different. And it's such a fascinating, strange story. And has such a great cast. So if you have the time, I think combine the other three together about an hour and 20 minutes. So
Okay, the short
would
films.
recommend and would recommend all of you. And next week, you can hear me talk about Ratcatcher with my buddy Foster. And the week after that, talking about Poison with my buddy Rowan. And that's basically a wrap on this Wes Anderson series. I will be doing a special episode on the Phoenician Scheme, his brand new film, once that does come out in theaters and I get a chance to go check that out. But let's send you all home listening with some recommendations. But Emily, what would you like to recommend to everybody?
Ah, as far as a video game, Hogwarts Legacy, it's something that I
Mm,
spend a lot of time on. I think it's a great open world game. I think it's a very different perspective of Hogwarts and the lands in general. I think it gives you the ability to do a little of exploring on your own without running into the characters that we're all familiar with. So I think it's a lot of fun.
I have spent many a time thinking about Harry Potter, reading Harry Potter, watching Harry Potter. I owned Sorcerer's Stone game on PC, and then I think I owned the Chamber of Secrets game on my GameCube at one point. So like I've spent many a time thinking about Harry Potter, and I think one of those dreams is like you being able to actually be in Harry Potter, and it sounds like this particular game is like what really captures that. And you could all pregame for the new HBO series that we're getting, the Max series, because Warner Brothers can't help themselves and they need money. So, and they're like, well, we're gonna make some more Harry Potter. Um, so my standard recommendations usually a new film, a film off my watch list, and a film that I rewatched from my own collection. One new film that I wanted to recommend that also checks a box for music is Pink Floyd at Pompeii. And this is a new 4K remastered concert film from Pink Floyd from 1971. So this is I'm a big Pink Floyd fan. So like thinking about like This was post Sid Barrett, their original frontman, leaving the band after he destroyed his brain on acid. And the like famous quartet of David Gilmour, Roger Waters, Nick Mason, Richard Wright performing some really great songs in this amphitheater in Pompeii. And it's such an interesting choice, but then also it has little interludes into them actually recording and bringing Dark Side of the Moon to life, which adds some interesting stuff. So if you love Pink Floyd and you interested in music, this is a really cool documentary concert film to check out. It's being released in IMAX, which is really cool. And it's only an hour and 25 minutes. So it's pretty lean, condensed little film. A film I watched off my watch list, I literally finished this like 2 hours before I started recording, was Mary, Queen of Scots. This is a 1971 adaptation of the story of Mary Stuart. I had seen the John Ford film because I watched all of his films. I was not a fan of that one. I was pretty bored with it. Um, I had such high hopes for the 2018 version with Margot Robbie and Saoirse Ronan, and like the cast is amazing in that. It just kind of like hits all the expected like period drama kind of things. This one certainly does that too, except there's a little bit of fire here, and there's some like shocking and like really interesting choices that they make with some of the characters and the conflicts in this, and has a really good cast. Vanessa Redgrave was nominated for Best Actress for playing Mary Stewart in this film, and I think it was Glenda Jackson or Johnson. I'm trying to remember the actor's name who played Queen Elizabeth. She was also fantastic. There's also a very young Timothy Dalton in it, which I was like, this is really weird. Why does he have blonde hair? But it has a really great cast. Um, I had to find this on the internet because it is not streaming anywhere. So just be forewarned if you want to go check this out. It's on some random website that I found. And then one film that I rewatched from my own collection was Night of the Living Dead. I rewatched this over the weekend. It's a nice, lean, like 95-minute classic horror film from George A. Romero. If you love zombie movies, like this was it. Like this set everything that you know about zombie movies. Um, they could be destroyed by being shot and in the head and destroying the brain, burning the bodies, all that fun stuff. And also it has some very interesting layers in terms of politics and race relations at the time as well. Cause like this came out like 68.
Mm.
So still really relevant. And it was also very interesting to see a black man being the lead in the horror movie like this at that point. And not gonna lie, I unabashedly quote, "They're coming for you, Barbara," on a regular basis because it's legitimately one of the funniest line readings of anything in a movie. But it really does hold up. It's still eerie and unnerving and has quite the shocking ending if you haven't seen it. So would recommend, obviously, which is why I brought it up. But Emily, thank you so much for coming on and chatting about the Swan with me.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really a great film. I'm glad I got to watch
Yep.
it.
And Emily will be back. She will return. Once I get into my Hitchcock series, because we have a big Hitchcock fan here. So
Yeah,
there we go. But thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland reviewer.